Alright guys, welcome back to What Could Go Wrong. So gonna kind of switch things up a little bit and I'm gonna do a tier list today. So this is not gonna be a tier list based off of anything more than things that I have seen throughout doing dungeons. Um During season one, I have run a lot of different classes personally, and I have run with a lot of different classes. So today I wanted to go over like just an experience thing. Now I am going to premise this by saying this video is not for people pushing high end content. This video is not for people who are trying to get world first titles, anything like that. All this is just the average key. So generally, I have been running between 5 and 9s on a pretty regular basis with different classes. I've been tanking a lot over the season. I have a couple DPS I've been working on. So I'm just going to go ahead and go off of what I have seen, what I have played, and hopefully no more ads pop up. But I'm just going to go off of that. So starting everything off with Arms Warrior. So I have not actually played Arms since back in Dragonflight, but I've run with a few Arms Warriors, and overall, I'm going to put them in B. All right. Actually, I think I'm going to get rid of that row. I don't see a need for a tier there. All right. So just going to go off of this, and before I go any further, before I talk more about arms and what I've seen, just kind of a quick explanation. So S tier is going to be like top value, the best of the best. Basically, if I put them in S tier, that means they're on point with utility, they're on point with damage, they're aggro, like whatever the case may be, they're all there. A tier is they're pretty good. They do all right. They bring a couple good things. They're still pretty good. B tier is pretty much the same as A tier. The only difference is they are lacking in one area or another that would prevent them from being all right and a good spec to bring. And then C tier is just going to be if you want to bring an extra DPS, if you have the extra spot, if you want an extra tank, like they're okay. They'll do the job, but they're not ideal. D tier, they're just not really worth it. They're not that great. You could fill the spot with them, but I would look for somebody else. And then F tier is your very standard. Fuck that spec. Like you don't want them at all. Like they're completely useless. They do nothing for your group. They don't really bring anything extra. They don't have the damage profile. Like they're just terrible. All right. And yes, I am going to be ranking the tanks and healers. This is going to be a full tier list. Um, and I might do a couple more tier lists ranking like specific tanks and DPS, things of that nature. But for now, I'm just going to do everybody. So, with that explanation out of the way, back to Arms Warrior. So, Arms has a really good damage profile. They have a couple of really good things that can help out. They have some survivability, like they can take a couple hits, but they don't really bring anything to your group. They have a little bit of a buff, but it's not anything crazy. They're just not doing enough to warrant a guarantee spot, but they're also not bad enough that like you could take them. They're in that middle of like they're not good to take every time, but they're not bad to not take every time. So that's where I'm gonna rank. Excuse me. That's where I'm gonna rank B tier today. That wow. That's where I'm gonna rank Arms Warrior today, if I could actually use words. Uh, all right. So moving on to Prot Warrior. So I'm gonna put Prot Warrior into A tier. Um, Prot Warrior as a whole, this actually I started out doing a lot this season on a Prot Warrior. I started doing a lot with tanking and with getting into it and pushing. And what I noticed about Prot Warrior is I can take a hit. I have something for everything. Like no matter what the situation is, I can always bring something to the table to deal with it. Right. So uh in general, they have something for everything. And the only reason why I'm not going to put them into A tier is very simply they have aggro issues. Obviously, with the threat changes, I haven't really played with my Prot Warrior to know if the threat buffs to tanks. I don't know if all the changes that Warriors have gotten. I don't know if it's enough to balance out. But I know from my experience and from what I have seen and from what I've played, like they still have some threat issues. They still, if the DPS jump in a half second too early, or if stuff doesn't go right, then like they do lose threat very easily. And that's a problem as a tank, especially a tank who can handle just about anything. All right. So next is Fury Warrior. So I'm gonna put Fury Warrior right here in A tier, but I'm gonna put it above Prot Warrior. So the reason why I put it above Prot Warrior, Fury, they don't have anything unique like all Warrior class specs. They don't have anything unique that they bring, but Fury comes in with a damage profile that speaks for itself. They have very unique self healing. They have the ability with hero talents to absolutely go off the wall. Um, they are able to deal with a lot. They can survive mechanics. They have defensives to answer for it. Like they do really really well. The only thing they don't have is they don't have something special to bring to the group, which is a problem for warriors as a whole, and it's been a problem for warriors for a while. Is they don't bring anything special. So moving right along to assassination. So I have played Assassination. That has been my go-to spec for Rogue since back in Wrath of the Lich King. It's how I learned how to play Rogue. It's where I played. So like I really enjoy it, and everything I have seen puts Rogues in S tier. So I understand like they're in the meta, and oh yeah, it is what it is. Okay, but the whole reason why I put them in S tier is one, you have an interrupt that is relatively low cooldown. You have a talent that can give you a silence, and for 4 seconds, everything's silenced right out of stealth. And there's no cooldown, so you can refresh that. So that 4 seconds, depending on the talents that you take, that 4 seconds can very easily turn into 8 seconds. And within 8 seconds, everything's silenced for those 8 seconds. Now the group is over halfway dead. Everybody just has to focus on their damage profile. Push out as much damage as you can, as much as you can do, as much as you can do. Blow your cooldowns if it's a big pull. If there's a lot of casters, you can single target focus that caster, and you can get them burned down really really quick, and you can do really really well. So what I would say for assassination is they bring something very unique that not many other classes can do. And interrupts this season are so important. And it is so big to get the interrupt. And having 8 seconds where you don't have to think about an interrupt, you just have to do damage, you just have to establish threat, you just have to do what you need to do, heal up the group, like that's all you focus on. That is a game changer. And I think assassination is very slept on by a lot of people because of the utility that they bring in that one area. Now, with that being said, you also look at the talent trees and you can see like their damage profile is virtually unmatched. I know that a lot of assassination rogues are capping out. Last I personally saw, they were capping out at 17s. That could have changed. I would have to look. But the fact that you can put a rogue, which is a leather spec, not necessarily the tankiest of leather specs either, and you can put them in a 17, which is a very high end content, given that, again, last I saw, the highest timed key was a 19. So like they're 2 keys away from the maximum as a very squishy DPS. And that, I think personally, that is amazing, and I think that that is wonderful to see, and I think that is not often you see a spec that relies mostly on bleeds and things being alive longer do really really well at high end content because of the way damage works and the way damage is received and the way that things fall off. So with that being said, let's move on to subtlety. So, I'm going to be honest. I don't know a lot about this spec, but I have seen this spec quite a bit. I've actually I ran my first +7 that I ever did. I believe it was on my mage, if I remember correctly. But my first +7 ever, I had a subtlety rogue in the group, and their damage profile was not there. The utility that they were offering was not really there. They were not performing outside of a very typical do damage, do an interrupt, do damage, do an interrupt, do damage, do an interrupt. They didn't really bring anything special to the group. They didn't bring anything like great. The damage was okay, but it really wasn't great. So I'm gonna put them into C tier, solely because their damage seemed to do all right. That's it. That's about what they brought to the group. So you could take a subtlety. It's an interrupt on a relatively low cooldown, and it's a damage profile. But that's about all there is with subtlety from my experience and what I've seen. Next up, going to outlaw combat, depending on what era you come from. But I am going to put outlaw here into B tier. So much like Arms Warrior, they have really unique survivability. They have really good damage. But again, they don't really have anything special that they bring to the group. Um, the damage profile that I see from Outlaw Rogues is just better than what you see from Subtlety. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say it's above Arms just because of the tanky factor. I feel like Arms is a little bit more tanky than a Outlaw is, but at the same time, they're very much in the same situation. They don't have anything special to bring, but it works. And one thing I will say, I have ignored Shroud throughout this 3 rogue specs for a reason. So Shroud of Concealment is nice, but at the same time, I haven't really seen any situations where it was a you need to have it. I personally have run dungeons where Shroud, no Shroud didn't make a difference, right? So when I say they don't really bring anything special, what I'm really saying is they don't bring anything that you really just want to have, right? Now, moving along, I am going to skip around a little bit. All right, I'm not going to do hunters next. I'm actually going to move into death knights. All right, so starting off with unholy. This is probably the spec I know the least amount about. I was actually watching some streams last night, and I've been trying to do some research, trying to understand how the spec works. In my experience, I've done 2 keys with an unholy death knight. They have really good damage. They obviously have grips and stops, and they have the interrupts. They have stun, silences. Like the talent tree for Death Knight can really give you something good. But at the same time, I also feel like Unholy Death Knight is really just it's got a handful of things that are nice to have. It's got the magic absorbs, it's got everything, but it's not quite enough to put it in S tier. So I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna put it at the come on, top of A tier. All right. So their damage profile is definitely there. The uniqueness of the class, the magic, the ability to pull those casters in, it is great. It is so amazing to have that. But there are ways around it, so that's why I wouldn't put it in S tier. Frost, I'm gonna put in a very similar situation, right? I think in keys, especially in pug environments, I think Unholy is gonna always outshine Frost, just because Frost right now is playing breath. And with a breath build, it really requires your tank to understand how to group mobs, when to pull big, when to go small, when to do one group two. You have to pull around their cooldowns. And if you don't understand how Frost works, that makes it very, very difficult. With Unholy, you don't necessarily need that. You don't have to pull around cooldowns, you don't have to worry about that to get the damage profile. So I would say Unholy, just because of the way Mythic Plus works and because of the way that pugs work, I'm gonna put Unholy in front of Frost. All right. Last but not least, I'm going to hit Blood in A tier above Protection. So the reason why I'm going to put Blood above Protection is one simple thing: magic absorbs. Right. So there's a lot of magic going on. There's a lot of magic to be dealt with, and Unholy, Frost, and Blood all have very unique perspectives on dealing with magic damage. Now, with that being said, Blood is far from an S tier tank. I think it is one of the better tanks because you can handle a lot of damage. You can deal with a lot. Much like Protection Warriors, you can kind of throw a lot out there. You don't have as many aggro issues. You don't have as many threat problems. You can generally get a hold of a group and maintain it. The issue with blood, and again, I have addressed this in a previous video, the issue with blood, and the whole reason why I don't think blood can be an S tier tank and why I don't think blood will ever be an S tier tank is solely based off of the fact that when push comes to shove, you have a hard time surviving the initial pull, right? I was running with a healer friend and I was on my blood death knight, and she said, "Yeah, the only time I ever heal you is at the start of the pull. After that, I don't worry about it unless you drop below 30% health. Then I start getting concerned." I was like, "Huh, that makes sense." And what I've noticed is that's how all healers are. And if the healer is not on point, and if the healer is not absolutely ready to go at the start of that pull, blood is really going to struggle because you have to do damage to prevent damage. You have to take damage to heal the damage. You have to get your shards up. You have to get your absorbs up. There's so much going on. The first 7 seconds of the pull is the most dangerous time for blood death knights. Not even gonna lie about that. Okay, so moving along. Where do I want to go next? Uh, Let's do Demon Hunters. So Vengeance. All right. So I made a video back in Dragonflight, basically just talking about how to be successful as a Vengeance Demon Hunter. I've made videos, or yeah, I made videos of doing like timed keys, a couple untimed keys, talking through like how to build a group around a Vengeance Demon Hunter, how to get everything ready to go. And unfortunately, at the start of the start of the War Within, Vengeance kind of got hit really hard with those tank debuffs. And then furthermore, they got hit even harder when the anniversary patch came out. Those two things combined, the nerfs to those tanks, or the nerf to tanks in general, mixed with the way that our defensives work now and the way that you play now, it is really, really hard to be an effective demon hunter. Now, with that being said, it is still possible. It is still viable. I have still done things on my Vengeance Demon Hunter. I have done some runs at medium content. I've done low end content, and one thing I've noticed is I have gone from a situation where just my normal rotation of dealing with aggro and dealing with mobs, I am constantly overwhelmed by damage. And the way that Vengeance played in Dragonflight at the end of Shadowlands is we always got our shards and we popped cooldowns and we went into demon form, metamorphosis. Like we did all that to prevent incoming damage and to stay ahead of the damage. So unfortunately, because of the way that they changed things, we cannot stay ahead of that damage anymore, and it puts us very reliant on on specific spells to stay alive, pre-pull, the start of the pull, and then you're very healer reliant now, and that is not a good way to play. That's not a fun way to play. As a tank, you don't ever really want to be reliant on your healer to stay alive. You should be able to mitigate damage to be effective. So I'm going to put this into C tier because it is possible to be effective. It is very easy to do things as a demon hunter to help your group. You have imprison, you have things like that. But there's nothing really special anymore. You require a lot more focus from the healer. It's just all around a very difficult spec to master, and it's a very difficult spec to be good at. Not to say it's impossible, but it's just difficult. So my personal experience with Vengeance tanks and with playing Vengeance is it's a C tier spec. All right. Moving on to Havoc. I, I'm gonna be honest. I'm just gonna put Havoc in D tier. You can take a Havoc, absolutely. Like they can do really, really well. There are certain instances and certain dungeons where they do excel, but it's not universal. So like you can take them, but if it comes down to like a Vengeance Demon Hunter or a Fury Warrior, I'm gonna take that Fury Warrior. Oh, I'm sorry, Havoc Demon Hunter or a Fury Warrior. I'm gonna take that Fury Warrior every time, just because they're gonna do more for my group than what Havoc can do. And Again, I do not think that that's a bad thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that the state of demon hunters right now with the war within is very, very poor. And I think the devs could do a lot to fix it, but I also know that they won't. So, you know. Okay, so moving on. Talk about the evokers. So starting off with devastation. So I recently leveled up my devastation. I started doing things on devastation, and I noticed that devastation does really, really well. I have only ever really done a pug with I think one devastation, but from my experience, I'm gonna put him in B tier at the bottom of B tier though, because their damage is just not quite there. Like they do okay, they do all right, they keep up, they stay above the tank, but they require circumstances and situations to work. They are also very, very squishy. I noticed that like my defensives when I was doing keys, my defensives were always on cooldown, and there were times where it wasn't enough. I was still getting hit by just AoE damage, and my healer is spamming heals on me just to keep me alive. And that's a problem. You need survivability if you're going to play a DPS. Now, as far as what they bring to the group, you've got Lust. I feel like any Lust class should automatically be B tier because you need to have Lust. You have to have that, right? That is super, super important to the success or failure of keys. I know that I have timed keys without Lust, and oh my god, it was so bad. The pulls had to be a little bit more calculated. The bosses took about 30 to 45 seconds longer. Like it was just really, really intense. It was really rough, and I felt like a tryhard. I did a 5 on my protection warrior, and I didn't have a lust class, and oh my god, it felt like that dungeon took forever to get through just because we didn't have lust. So that increase is super, super crazy. Next up is augmentation. So I've actually done several keys with augmentation. I have done several keys not as an augmentation, but like I've done several keys without and with. Granted, I'm not running high end content. Like I said, this is pretty much a 5 to 10 ratio for keys, but I don't really notice a difference whether I have aug or I don't. So I'm really just going to put this down probably at the top of B tier because it does help. I mean they do a lot of good for the group. They do help out the group a lot. It is easier to time a key when you have one just because of how they work. But they don't really have a damage profile. They have a lust, but they're okay. On to preservation. So, preservation is a very complicated spec. Um, I have done some keys and dungeons as a preservation evoker. I have messed around, tried to learn the spec, tried to understand like why it's so complex. And basically, what I have figured out is preservation is good for certain tanks. Blood DK can work with preservation. Guardian Druid can work with preservation, and I would say a protection paladin could work with preservation. All in all, preservation is just not that great. They're not a universal healer. They do a lot of group wide healing. They do a lot of burst healing, and that's not good for tanks like Brewmaster who need that constant like, okay, hey, I need you to keep me alive, or Vengeance, hey, I need you to kind of focus on me, or even Protection Warrior where it's like, hey, I'm dealing with this incoming tank buster, but you've got to get me through the tank buster. And it's really hard for preservation to fixate on one person. And it's really hard to really understand how to keep that one person alive. So I'm going to actually put preservation into C tier. I know I said that lust should be a B tier, but preservation doesn't really do a whole lot for the group as a whole other than just lusting. So it's really the only thing they bring to the table. So I would not personally take a preservation unless you really didn't have a choice, or if you have a friend who plays a preservation, understands that you can be in voice comms with. Like I get that, but all in all, preservation is not that great. but just because they have Lust, I'm gonna put them at the top of C tier, maybe. There it goes. There we go. All right. So moving along, um, talk about Priest. So starting off with Holy Priest, I'm just gonna be perfectly honest with you, and I don't think this needs an explanation. I'm just gonna put Holy Priest into D tier. I personally do not run with Holy Priest. That's not true. I run with one Holy Priest solely based off the fact that I can be in comms with her. She knows what she's doing, and she's always on top of whatever she needs to be on top of. By far, one of the best Holy Priests I've seen. But as far as a pug environment goes, they're just not there. They are struggling. They're constantly running out of mana. They're just not in a good place. Discipline, on the other hand, I'm going to put Discipline into probably middle of A tier, right behind Frost and Unholy. So Discipline does really, really well. The problem with Discipline is they don't have an interrupt. So they can never be an S tier in my book. They would never be an S tier healer spec. Now, I also played a Discipline Priest that is up until the end of Dragonflight, beginning of War Within. That's the only healer I ever played, was a Discipline Priest. Previous expansions, yes. But for Dragonflight and the War Within, I've played two healers. We'll get to the other one here in a minute. But Discipline Priest, the throughput that they have is really good. The damage profile they have is really good. The absorbs they have are really good. They do really, really good content or keys, but they don't have an interrupt, and that can sometimes hurt your group because there are times where you need your healer to get that interrupt to make the pull work. There are some times that you can heal through things, but it's not it's not an always scenario. So I'm gonna put them in the middle of B tier just because without that interrupt, I feel like that makes them less than Frost and Unholy. But I also think it's slightly better than Fury and Blood and Prot because they do bring a lot more to the group. They're able to keep up a lot better, and unlike Warriors in general, they have something to offer the group. Last but not least is Shadow. So I've actually done quite a bit with Shadow Priest. I was watching a stream the other day, and Shadow Priest was going insane. So I'm gonna put Shadow right behind Fury because I feel like they do a lot for the group. They bring a lot to the group. Just like even though it's not as strong, but that power word shield, flash heals, that off heals that they can offer, they give a lot of things to the group. But again, like with Discipline, they don't have enough to be needed in a group, in my opinion. Um, with that being said, I feel like the damage profile they have is just not competing with Fury. I don't think that Shadow Priest, just because of everything they do passively and everything they do like with the off heals and with like helping out mitigations and the way their defensive profile works. Like I just don't think that they have the capability to outshine Fury. I also think that Fury is twice as tanky as Shadow is. So that's the only reason why I would put Shadow behind them. If Fury was a little less tanky, if they didn't have the same damage profile, like I feel like those two could be interchangeable. But at the same time, I really think that Shadow is just slightly worse inherently because it's a cloth. It does background stuff. I just don't think it's going to compete with the damage profile that Fury brings. Next, let's go with let's jump into druids. So Guardian Druid. I'm gonna put Guardian Druid in between Blood and Prot. And here's why. So Guardian Druid, unlike Blood DKs, it has the ability to self heal, and I can cast those self heals before I go into combat, so that I can get that big pull together. But unlike Protection Warrior, I don't necessarily have the ability to deal with anything that comes my way, especially magic damage or tank busters that are going to hit. Like I can't always deal with that. So I think they are slightly better than Blood based off of the healing profile, but worse than Blood because they don't have the magic mitigation. I think they are slightly better than Protection Warrior because they don't have the aggro issues and they have the ability to heal themselves on a cooldown, but they don't have the ability to deal with everything, so they're not quite as good as Protection Warriors. So I think Blood is definitely a better tank than Warrior, but I also think that Druid is less than Blood and slightly better than Protection. But at the same time, I would easily be able to run it like this, put Blood, Prot, Druid. I could very easily run Druid in the middle. I think it is slightly better than Protection, though, just because of the self healing, and that can be a game changer, especially in the seconds when you're getting a battle res because your healer got hit with something and died. Okay. So next up, I'm going to go with Balance, and I'm actually going to put Balance into C tier. I mean, you could take a balance. They do good damage, but like they're not super great. They're very dot reliant. There's just they're okay, and they bring a battle res, which is super important. But they're just not super great in a pug environment because I think again you do kind of need to pull around their cooldowns to fully understand that. Fury, Fury, a Fury Druid, a Feral Druid. I would honestly, I'm gonna put Feral, um, probably behind Balance. Just the way that Feral works, it's very similar to Assassination Rogue with the bleeds and the bites and everything like that. The big difference is they don't really have the damage profile. I think you can really pop off with Feral, but I also think that it's very complex, and you have to be able to focus in on what you're doing. I've done a couple of keys as a feral druid, and I was constantly doing something like it was insane, crazy. Um, Last up for the druid specs is going to be a restoration druid. So this is the other healer that I have played around with, and I'm going to put them at the very top of B tier. Now, the reason why I put them in front of everybody at B tier is because of one, they have a battle res that no other spec in this tier has. Two, they have very good cooldowns to work with to keep the group alive. And three, as a healer, it's so much easier to focus on the group. With these other specs, you can't necessarily focus as much. I think augmentation could, but as a healer, you can focus on your damage, keeping people alive, going with the interrupt rotation, and you're chilling. The problem with Resto Druid, and this is why I don't put it in A tier with Discipline Priest, is the healing feels very weak. I felt like I was dotting everybody up and watching their health bars drop all the way down, come up a little, drop all the way down, come up a little. I felt like if I wasn't doing something, people were gonna die, and that should not feel. It should not feel that way as a healer. You should not feel like okay, I'm healing, I'm healing, I'm healing, I'm healing, I'm healing, I'm healing. Like you have other stuff to keep up with, and there are ways to do it. There are druids out there who are just astronomical at what they do, and they are pushing high end content. But I think just for a casual pug, the damage profile is just not really there. Well, let me rephrase that. The damage profile mixed with a healing profile mixed with the way that it all works, I just don't think it's quite there. All right. Moving along here. It's actually taking a little longer than I thought, so I'm going to try and speed up here. I think monks would be pretty quick. So monks in general do not really bring a whole lot to the group. Ring of Peace is about the best you can do. I'm going to rank all three of them, and then I'm going to explain why. So I'm going to put Windwalker in the middle here. I'm going to put Brewmaster here, and I'm going to put Mistweaver in B tier. So Start at the bottom here. Brewmaster, very squishy tank. They looked really good at the start of the season, but they did not turn out to be as good as what we thought they were going to be, which was very very depressing. I was hoping to main Brewmaster, but I mean at a 600 item level, I'm getting one shot in keys. That should never happen. They just don't have the mitigation to deal with stuff. You get killed to melee attacks very very easily, which is a problem for a tank. And just overall, they're just not performing nearly what I feel that they should be. Windwalker has a phenomenal damage profile. That's about it. Mistweaver, I would say Mistweaver is really good depending on the group comp. So if you're running 3 range DPS and I don't know, we'll say 3 range DPS and a Blood Death Knight, a Mistweaver is really going to struggle because they need to be up in combat, and the fist weaving and the way that they play really really struggles. Um, if on the other hand, if you have 3 melee DPS and then you have that same Blood Death Knight and then you have Mistweaver, I think the Mistweaver is going to excel. But I also think that depending on the dungeon the dungeon determines the comp is really what it comes down to. Like, what do you want as a um what do you want your comp, or what do you want out of the dungeon, and then make your comp to that. Like, are you trying to +3 it? Okay, you want a specific comp. Are you trying to just time it? Okay, you need to be smarter. Are you just running the key for whatever? Doesn't really matter. But Mistweaver is very group dependent to be successful. I think they are phenomenal healers. I think they're very, very strong. And I think that they are very, very good at what they do. But being comp dependent is going to determine a lot. Actually, I'm going to move them right behind Restoration because they do have better output than Restoration, but Restoration's not as comp dependent, I don't feel like. They both have their issues, but I think Restoration is slightly better. Okay, next up, go ahead and do the Hunter spec. So I'll do the same thing. So Beast Mastery, we're just going to, put Beast Mastery into D tier. And I'm going to put Survival, just above Discipline, and I'll put Marksmanship at the top of B tier. So Beast Mastery, they have Lust. So again, I guess I was wrong earlier when I said that a Lust class should be a B tier spec, because Beast Mastery just doesn't have the damage profile. They don't really bring anything unique to the group outside of Lust. Like, they're just not great. They're very very squishy. They are oftentimes not keeping up with the rest of the group, and I just don't feel like they're a very good spec all the way around. I think there was a time when I would have very very quickly put Beast Mastery all the way up here in front of A, maybe even into S. But I think right now, just with the way things are and the state they're in, I would say they're probably D tier. Um, I would not personally take them. I mean, if you're just trying to get the key going, like, yeah, sure, grab them. But like, if it comes down to like a Beast Mastery Hunter or a Windwalker Monk, I would definitely take that Windwalker first. I am actually going to move them to the top of D tier though. Next up, talk about Marksmanship. So Marksmanship in general seems to be doing pretty good. They've got really good damage. They've got the ability to bring Lust. They're getting some really nice changes. And all in all, I think that they're doing just fine. But I also don't think they're anything to write home about. I think they're just pretty much just keeping up. They're just doing really, really well. Let me rephrase that. They're doing well, but they're also like not going crazy. I put them at the top of B tier, simply because I feel like their damage profile for AoE situations and single target is much better than what you would see from any of these four. I just, in general, I think they would outshine both of those healers. I think that they outshine pretty much everybody just because of their unique ability to run single target or AoE. Either way. Finally, survival. I'm actually doing. I've been playing a lot of survival. I'm looking at maining a survival hunter for season two, just with not tanking anymore. And what I've noticed is, I mean, I have defensives for everything. I have phenomenal damage. Like it is absolutely insane the amount of things I can do on my survival hunter that you just can't do with the other two hunter specs. You can also bring a lust pet, very easily bring a lust pet, and it works. You know, the damage that you need your pet for and the damage you do on your own, they're separate, but they also work in sequence with each other. So all in all, I would say that survival, if they brought a little bit more to the group, maybe a buff, maybe something else, maybe push them to the top of A tier. I don't think survival would ever be an S tier. I guess it is possible, but I don't foresee that happening. All right, let's move on to specs I have not played and I've just been running with. So, paladins. If you've seen my videos before, you know I do not like playing a paladin. I do not like the playstyle of them. I don't enjoy it. I don't have fun with it. And I do not understand how the holy spec works at all. However, what I cannot argue with and what I cannot deny is Ret is an S tier spec. Prot is an S tier. Well, I'm just going to put it at the top of A tier. And I'm going to put this right behind it. So Ret speaks for itself. The damage profile, the mitigation, the interrupt, like everything. Ret just brings so much to the group. You really can't argue with it. Protection Paladin. I think the only reason why I don't put Protection Paladin into S tier is because they do get squishy. If you make a mistake, it can be very punishing. I've seen Protection Paladins go down at the blink of an eye, and I've seen Protection Paladins excel. I think the biggest thing that Protection offers is massive interrupts, and that is why they're at the top of the A tier. Holy Paladin. Oh my god, the amount of healing that you can get from a Holy Paladin is insane. And like watching them pop off and watching their damage go crazy while their healing's going crazy and everything just kind of comes together and it is so amazing to see. And like I think Holy Paladin is one of the better healers in the game. They're also, in my opinion, the tankiest healer in the game. I think that it is absolutely insane. And I think that if you could get a comp going of a maybe a holy paladin, a protection warrior, a ret paladin, and an assassination rogue, and then any other DPS, I think you could push high end content. I really do. The only reason why I would put protection paladin above holy paladin is solely based off of the amount of interrupts that protection offers that holy just cannot compete with. I don't think there's a single spec in the game outside of assassination that could compete with um, protection paladin's interrupt abilities. All right. Um, go one, do one more. So go with the warlocks. So I've not seen a whole lot of demonology. I've seen a little bit, and from what I've seen, they're not impressive. I'm gonna put a middle of C tier. I just haven't seen a whole lot of them. People don't seem to be running demonology. It does not appear to be a great spec. It just seems okay. Affliction Warlock. I would put Affliction the bottom of B tier. They have really good damage. They have really good utility. They do seem to be doing really well, but they are not actually no. Put it at the top of C tier because they just don't have like that one thing that you just want to have in the group, but you could live without. But like they're just not. I just don't feel like they're B tier. And then Destruction. I'm gonna put Destruction at the bottom of B tier solely because they have a phenomenal damage profile. That is really what makes them a B tier spec. And that is what I think makes them pop off. And I think that's what makes them better than all the other specs. Going on to what are shamans? Restoration Shaman. But Restoration Shaman right behind Discipline Priest. Oops. They do really, really well. And they seem to keep up. They have a lot of mitigation for things. They seem to have a good healing output. They have the interrupt that Discipline does not have. But I think in all that shamans become very reactive, and I think that right now we're in a state where you can't be a reactive healer. I just don't think that that's a thing right now. Elemental, um, their damage profile and lust alone, I would put them at the bottom of A tier. But that's about it. They don't seem to have anything super, super crazy. They've got the totem that might bring them up a little bit, but it's, you know. And then enhancement. So I actually played enhancement quite a bit at the start of the season. I will argue that the fire build is still better than the elemental build people are running. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more interactive, and it is twice as good. But the diversity in their spells, the amount of utility they bring, having everything. The only thing that sets them apart from the other specs is they are super squishy. And that becomes a problem. They become solely reliant on healers who can focus them. Some situations that's good, and I know they're pushing high end content, but if you take away augmentation, Elemental Shaman would not be there. But I am going to put them at the top of the A tier. Yeah. All right. Mages. Whew. So I'm going to be very controversial with this. Yeah. Here's why I put all three mage specs into S tier. Yes, they are super squishy and they do require a little bit closer to perfectionist play. But Frost and Arcane can do damage with or without a tank pulling around them. Fire has combust windows that when played right doesn't really matter. And if your tank is running Omni CD and he watches when your combust comes off a cooldown and pulls around your combust windows, you're chilling. If he doesn't pull around your combust windows, you're still good because you know in the back of your mind, okay, combust is up. Oh, this is going to be a bigger pull. Oh, this is going to be a harder pull. This is going to be easier. It is so easy to do phenomenal damage on all three of those specs. And I think that they all three deserve to be in S tier. They also bring lust. They bring group wide defensives. They bring self mitigation. And depending on the talent you take, you can heal. You can do self healing whenever you pop certain defensives. So at the end of the day, I feel like mages in general are just that good, right? Now, before I end this, no, I did not put anything into F tier. Yes, I had an F tier. No, D is not meant to be the don't advice, right? But when it comes right down to it, any spec, any group, any comp is going to work at these lower end keys. All this is just the way that I look at things and the way that I see things when I start creating a group, right? Now, before, oops, see if I can reset this. Let's see if this will work. Oh no. I'm using an old template tier list. I literally pulled this off of Google. Don't judge me. Let's see if I'm gonna try and reset it here. Can I not? There it is. Haha, there's a whole button that says reset. Now, this is what I'm going to do before I close this off. This is where I'm going to do everything. So let's change that from S to solid group. All right, group. Oops. Group. Let's go to a decent group. Okay, that'll work. So I put four. Oh yeah, I do. Let's go viable. Woo. All right, so I put 4 tanks into the groups. And before I end this video, I see you were at the bottom, you were in the middle, you were here, and you were at the top. All right, so with these 4 groups, this is kind of like my personal opinion on how to create a group based off the tank. If you choose to run as a tank, if you choose to run as a healer, or if you're just running as a DPS. So, what I would say with this for healers, I would put where is it? Holy Paladin with that. You know what? I'm gonna get rid of these because I don't want to name these groups because none of these are better than the other. They just each bring something unique, right? That, do that. Actually, do that. Where's there it is. Do this. Yeah. So when I would run these tanks, or when I would run as a healer, or when I would run in the DPS groups, or when I watch videos, or when I watch things, this is the tank healer combo that I see the most success with, right? Holy Paladin just works with Protection Warrior. Don't know why, don't know how, just it works. Monks and druids kind of feed off of each other because they're very similar. The synergy between shamans and death knights is unmatched. Discipline can compensate for when Holy Paladin needs a little extra bump. I would also say that that discipline could interchange here. I think that these two are very interchangeable just because of how they work and how they work with each other, right? But for now, we'll leave like that. Okay. With this group and with the comp setup, I think just because I know that it works, because this is what high end content pushers are running, I know that's a solid setup. Here. That right there. Yeah. That right there. And then probably Fury with. So these comps, right? Some of the utility and the way that these specs all work in together, I feel like if you have a group, if you're forming a five man team, all right, this is really what you should look for, right? If it's coordinated, uncoordinated, really doesn't matter. See the previous tier list. But if you're in a coordinated group, this is what I would push for, and here's why. So we already know that this first comp works, like it's proven. You can look at the Raider IO and you can see this works. This works because of the healer synergy, plus the way that the shaman's going to be able to heal, Plus, you've got 2 ranged outside, so you can still get your totem. Actually, I think I wanna change this a little bit. I would almost say that this warlock go away. This warlock is really I would take that out actually, now that I look at that, just because I just thought about how healing stream totem works. I would take that out, and I would probably replace it with yeah, I would replace it with Fury. Yeah, that I would put Holy in this group. Yeah. I would go more like that just because of the way that your healing stream totem is gonna work and your link totem, spirit link totem for the shaman. Like that's gonna be a solid setup. As far as this comp, I think that would kill it because you've got the range to help out the healer. You've only got one person to worry about. Plus, you've got massive windows of damage from all three of these. The druid's already doing a lot to keep himself alive. Like I think this is phenomenal. The synergy between protection and holy paladin, like I said earlier, is just out of this world. It is oh my god. I used to specifically look for holy paladins to run with my warrior. Then you've got your range DPS. That gives you time if you lose the aggro, and if they are still having the aggro issues, you have time to charge in and hit something to get threat on it again. You have time to throw a taunt on something before it gets out. Then you've also got people in, you've got silences so that you can get everything grouped up the way that you want so that you can see what's going on. You've got insane healing going out to everybody. It's phenomenal. I would say these 4 group setups right here, if you run these 4 groups, I think that you are hands down going to be successful. But anyway, that is it for today. Sorry the video so probably going to end up being a lot longer than what I wanted it to be. But hey, if you like the content, please like, subscribe. If you want to see more tier lists, if you want to see a breakdown of what I think of individual tier lists, if you want to see class play styles, if you want to see the way that I do talents, how I learn to do stuff, by all means, leave a comment down below. No problems doing class talks, no problems doing whatever it is that you guys want to see. Just keep me up to date on what is interesting to y'all. But yeah, all right. Everybody have a great day. And remember, hit the like and subscribe. And never forget what could possibly go wrong.